Well, even when the government was not entirely right of center, there was very little progress, if any, in the peace negotiations with the Palestinians. With this government, I do not expect a single movement forward as far as the peace process goes. And as a matter of fact, I think it will not only be installed, but for sure the settlement will be expanded. Maybe more territory will be expropriated. That is going to create a major problem. And obviously, the White House pretty much decided there is no point in pushing now for the resumption of the peace negotiations. And the Palestinian Authority are now determined to go back to the United Nations Security Council and try again to get recognition by the UN body for statehood. And so this government basically changed the dynamics in a very negative way. And so the consequences of that is basically more time will be wasted, and it is not in Israel's favor. Well, I mean, when you have, in Israel, first of all, let me say this to you, political ambitions and come first, favoritism come second or third, party interests come third or second for that matter. But the truth of what we see when you survey the Israeli political system, you find that unless these first three elements are satisfied, you're going to pretty much neglect the national interest. Almost inadvertently, that's what's going to happen. And this is what's been taking place. So when you have a single party like, say, take the Jewish Home, who, because Lieberman defected, Naftali Bennett, the leader of this party, became basically the kingmaker. He made sure, and he was able successfully extort, I should say, from Netanyahu, or just about everything that he wanted. The worst thing and the most appalling thing, in my view, is that appointing, for example, Ayelet Shaked to be the justice minister, no less. I just want you to think about that, justice minister of an individual who openly called for the annihilation of the Palestinian people, men, women, and children. And it is so pathetic, so sad. And just imagine what kind of message appointment of Shaked to this particular position sent to the international community. And that is terrible for Israel's image. I really don't think that this government is representative of the Israeli public, because you have to look at the numbers. Netanyahu, albeit he won 30 seats in the Israeli parliament, this represents only 25% of the total number, which is 120. Moreover, only 70% of the Israeli public voted. So even if you include Naftali Bennett party, that is a Jewish Home, between the two of them, they have only 30%. So what kind of representative government is this? What you need a single party that actually has a majority with a specific agenda. But when you have this kind of representation, which does not really reflect the public opinion, specifically when it comes to the peace process, just think, more than 70% of the Israeli public consistently would like to see an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And why is that not happening? One of the main reasons is the fact that the leadership has been, by and large, I dare say, bankrupt. Because if they were not pursuing peace in earnest, then peace is not going to happen, notwithstanding the public exhaustion and the desire to end this horrifying conflict that's been going on now for more than nearly 70 years. I really hope so, and I believe, based on what we're hearing and seeing, that he will not do so, because I think he knows that if he does join this kind of government, his own political career, his own political ambition to become the prime minister and do something positive for the country will be over. So I think if I were to advise him, I'll tell him to stay away from this kind of government, be strong in the opposition, challenge the government in every which way, in every direction, and make every effort you can to topple the Netanyahu government, and then force go to new elections in Israel. And he may well stand a much better chance to form the next Israeli government. You're going to need a change of leadership. Netanyahu has outlived his usefulness, if he was ever useful. And the time has come for change. And I think Herzog stands a better chance today than any of his predecessors in the Labour Party to be able to achieve that. When you talk about Kurdish independence, you have to think of historic terms. I do not believe that the Kurds, be that in Iraq, in Turkey, in Iran, and in Syria, have ever given up their aspiration for statehood. Certainly, the situations have changed. They've been divided into 4 different countries. But because of the events in Iraq itself, the rise of Saddam Hussein, the way Saddam Hussein treated the Kurds in Iraq, the Iraqi Kurds were able now to acquire or be able to establish their own autonomous rule with the support of the United States, and have demonstrated tremendous capacity and ability to run their internal affairs very, very successfully. And because now of the events in the region and basically the dismantlement of Iraq itself as a result of the Iraq War of 2003, the Iraqi Kurds now feel much more confident that the time has come for them to declare independence. The reason they haven't done so far is because of still the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East, and specifically, I should say, in Iraq and in Syria, because of the rises of ISIS and because of the ongoing war that is going on. So my feeling is that they will, absolutely, the Kurds in Iraq will become independent, and I think the United States has already resigned itself to this, and it's a matter, not a question of when, not if. I think this is going to be almost a natural development. That is, once the Kurds establish their own independent state, which is inevitable, then we're going to have to deal with the question of the split, the schism between the Sunni Iraqis as well as the majority Shiite. I cannot see any possibility that the Sunnis will basically accept their lot and do nothing about it. I think the Sunnis are going to also seek autonomous rule, perhaps with a very loose, very, very loose connection to the center, to the government in Baghdad, but they will be autonomous, if not completely independent. But my feelings, in order to avoid prolonging the war, prolonging the agony of the Iraqi people, ending the destruction, the United States and other powers involved, the Saudis and others, ought to think now in terms of what to do once ISIS is defeated. Begin a process. What is going to happen to the future of the Sunni Iraqis? They cannot wait. Nobody should wait until the defeat of ISIS. This may take a year or 2 or 3, but the preparation as to what the Sunni is going to be ending with in 2 or 3, 4 years is going to be critically important, and for one very important reason. If they know what to expect, you can now expect them to collaborate fully in trying to defeat ISIS. But if they don't know what to expect, they will have the real motivation to fight ISIS. As a matter of fact, some even are joining ISIS. You really need to distinguish between various tactical moves and strategic moves. For the Shia to train now some of the Sunni tribals to fight ISIS, this is a tactical move designed for one single reason, to try to defeat ISIS. And the Shiite will deal with the devil if they have to, in order to achieve that objective. But that does not necessarily mean, and in fact, I do not believe that changes the reality on the ground. The conflict between the Sunni and the Shiite is a fact of life. This is basically a war, and it is run by a proxy between the Saudis and the Iranian. And this war between the Sunni and the Shia is going to be with us for years, if not decades to come. And hence, what is absolutely necessary now to do is that making sure that once ISIS is weakened, hopefully destroyed, there is already a new order in place, a new political order in Iraq. And the United States ought to take the leading role in trying to establish that. You know, in talking some of officials from the Saudis as well as Israelis, it is abundantly clear that to them that no matter what kind of an agreement with Iran is produced, it's not going to be a good one. And that is because it is already built in it something which is worrisome to all of them, and that is, even if the Iranian adhere to every single clause of this agreement, within 10 years, they'll pretty much be free to do what they want to do. So the whole agreement is pretty much delaying, not preventing, delaying the time when Iran eventually will acquire nuclear weapons. I can tell you from what I know and I understand, I don't believe that Iran will ever give up its ambition to acquire nuclear weapons. So for the Saudis and the Israeli perspective, why do we have to wait only to face the same situation in 10 years now? In fact, it may be much less than that. So something different kind of an agreement is necessary. And short of dismantling much of Iranian's nuclear facility, there will be only a question of time. Hence, what you need is an agreement that is going to really prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, period. Still, many do believe this is possible, but I don't think the United States has made that strong effort in order to achieve that objective. You know, there is no doubt that Iran's behavior in the region will continue the way it is today, with or without nuclear weapons. But with the nuclear weapons, obviously Iran is going to be further emboldened. Iraq has never given up, Iran, its ambition, and will not do so, to become the region's hegemon. They're already boasting and saying we are in control of 5 capitals, and they want to establish the Iranian empire again, and Baghdad being the center, the capital of that new Persian empire. So this is not just talk. I believe many Iranians, specifically the leadership, the political leadership, the religious institutions, absolutely believe that this is within reach. And thus far, they find themselves rather successful. They are very much entrenched in Lebanon, very much so, maybe more so in Syria, certainly in Iraq, now in Yemen, and nothing is going to stop them unless there is a very strong, serious Sunni opposition, but that is going to take more than just Saudi Arabia. All the Sunni Arab states are going to have to get together and actually form the kind of military force that they wanted to form, united military force. That's going to be one requisite. And the second one is for the United States to provide the Gulf states with the security arrangement necessary, pretty much what in terms of national treaty, rather than assurances that the United States would take care of their security. So the Saudis and others actually are looking for defense treaty rather than merely an arrangement where the United States would basically guarantee their national security concerns. You know, anti-Semitism been with the Jews and against the Jews basically from time immemorial. And I don't think that any Jew, be that outside Israel or inside Israel, or any Israeli government, whatever it does or doesn't, is going to eliminate anti-Semitism. That has to be, you know, I should say, a given. But the focus now should be on the rise of anti-Semitism. And that is where I feel very strongly that the situation in Israel, the continuing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, in particular the continuing occupation, whether justified or not, the blockades against Gaza, again, justified or not, is sending terribly negative message to the international community. And those who have the already a natural tendency to be anti-Semite are now becoming more vociferous and are now openly becoming anti-Semites. And those who feel that the Palestinians are being mistreated systematically, that Israel is bullying the whole region for that matter, they feel that that is really instigating and strengthening the anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist sentiment, which translates to anti-Semitism. So to mitigate that, I think one of the most important things to do is to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and in particular, end the occupation. For Israel to remain a viable state, a Jewish state, a democratic state, it's going to have to change its domestic policies. It's going to have to stop discrimination against Israeli Arabs. This is just has to be a given. Because the truth of the matter is, the Israeli government, any government, will have to make a choice. Do they want the Israeli Arabs at one point, whether in 5 years, in 10 years, to become loyal Israeli citizens? Or do they want to create a fifth column within Israel itself? This is really what it's going to come down to. So the Israelis ought to think very carefully in terms of how to deal with this significant minority representing nearly 20%, and is going to grow considerably more, much faster than the Jewish Israeli population. So you're going to have to deal, and once they reach to be 35 or 40%, it's become very, very significant for Israel and how to deal with that. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the Israeli government has for many, many years been also discriminating against Jews, Oriental Jews, Jews who came from the Middle East in particular. You have heard recently the demonstration by Ethiopian Jews because of discrimination against them. And even the president of Israel, Rivlin, condemned that, and he characterized that as an open wound. So major effort ought to be done internally in order to begin to mend domestic wounds, because they will continue to fester otherwise, and that's going to undermine Israel's standing both certainly in the international community, but is undermining the government itself, undermining itself in the eyes of the Israeli public. I think at this juncture I would dare to say that, yes, Israel actions and inaction for that matter is going to impact dramatically the rise or the decline of anti-Semitism. Again, no matter what Israel does, it's not going to eliminate anti-Semitism, but Israel can be a major force in trying to mitigate that.